Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Everyday Strong with Dr. Michael G. Daniels. This is your host, CB Baker. We are back, Dr. Daniels, and we got a great one today. Our topic today is sex. And they always say sex sells. So I'm expecting this to be a big topic. Because, you know, one of our most famous podcast episodes that we've ever done, most listened to and watched, was when that pastor accidentally had his sex tape leaked. Mm-hmm. And boy, everybody and their mama wanted to hear about that one and wanted to watch that one. So I'm expecting this one to be on the same level of that, because we about to give a lot of married people around here like some freedom to get their freak on.
Well, you're right. I think it's important though, that people who are married, I'm not saying they don't do it anyway,
right?
But I think it's important for people who are married to recognize, that God is a God that understands pleasure, right? And that He gave us that pleasurable experience for a reason. And I think that oftentimes, even Bible counselors, they don't always, as they're counseling people, help them to understand and appreciate the value of intimacy. They don't oftentimes help them to understand there's a difference between sexual activity and intimacy, and the Bible does separate them into two distinct places. And so I think it's important for people to understand, what they are, why God presented them that way, and how we should use that for the betterment of our relationships, our marital relationships, I should say.
Yeah. So let's just dive right into it. So what is off limits for a married couple in the bedroom?
Well, the Bible doesn't say it in that light. So let's, if you don't mind, let's go back and look at, what it is we're talking about, right?
Okay.
So, because oftentimes when you talk about the bedroom, the first thing people think about is sex, right? Mm-hmm. And to me, that's a very narrow view. It's a very narrow way to look at things. If you look at it from the standpoint of the physiological body, of course, sexual activity is a part of God's plan, right? And we know that because the Bible says in Genesis, in first chapter, that we are designed to be fruitful and to multiply. So the primary purpose of sex is procreation.
Right.
It's so, you could have children and, so forth and so forth and so on. But we also have to note that intimacy and sex are not the same thing, even though they can intersect, right? You can have sex without intimacy.
That's a fact.
Right? And you can have intimacy without sex.
Yep.
Right? And so the sexual part of it does not draw a couple together for a lasting long time. So when we talk about the bedroom in a married couple, that's what I'm saying. I don't really equate it to sex, because I don't think intimacy starts in the bedroom. I think that's the problem. That we like to think of intimacy as starting in the bedroom, and that's not where it should start at, And there are two aspects to it too. There's sex, there's intimacy, and then there's intersection. For example, in 1 Corinthians, the Bible talks about sex and intimacy and how the two intersect, right? It talks about that if one party is seeking sex, because let me say this. I've been around for a long time. Let me say that I'm starting out for a long time. And I've been counseling for a long time. And in my counseling world, here's what I found out, that women are less prone to sex and more prone to intimacy. Men are more prone to sex and less prone to intimacy. And the problem becomes, because a woman wants intimacy and a man wants sex, that oftentimes the two of them don't necessarily connect, right? Mm-hmm. So if all I'm seeking is sex and she's seeking is intimacy, we have a problem. And so that's why in Corinthians, the Bible says that I have to understand that my body does not belong to me and my wife's body does not belong to her. But in fact, my body belongs to my wife and my wife's body belongs to me. And so the scripture says that we should not withhold ourselves from one another, except when one of us or both of us are fasting and praying. And the reason being is because we're trying to devote everything to God, right? And not to each other. So that's revolving around sex. That's not revolving around intimacy. Because that's why I say when you raise the question, well, what's off limits? Well, if we're just talking about sex, then a person may want 90% of things to be off limits, right? When we're talking intimacy, it changes. I think the first question is we have to understand who our body belongs to, right? So if my body belongs to my wife, then what's off limits? Because if it belongs to her, then shouldn't she have a right to do with it what she wants? Right. And if her body belongs to me, the same thing ought to be reciprocated, right? Shouldn't have a right to do with it what it belongs. And so that takes away that use of the body as a weapon. Right. Like some people will, because we are angry now, you sleep on one side of the bed, or put the pillows between you and this kind of thing. Right. If we go with that scripture, that means you got to move the pillows out the way. Right. Right. And so that's why I'm trying to keep it in that vein, because I want people to understand the difference between just the physical act and the emotional and intellectual act. Right. Because the pillow talk is very important. Just to really just sitting there and talking about nothing. Just being together, and you're right. A lot of men don't want to do that. Like, okay, look, when we going to get this thing popping, but if once you realize the importance of intimacy, it enhances the sex, so it's like, and without it, you can tell the difference. Mm-hmm. You can tell the difference when somebody's, punching the clock versus they're actually into it. Well, and I like to think of it this way. Intimacy begins at the moment I open my eyes, right? Because women prefer men. This has been my counseling experience. Women prefer men that make them feel good about themselves. Mm-hmm. Okay. So then that means that if I want to enhance our relationship, I need to make my spouse feel good about who she is. And that's not just in the bedroom act, right? That's when you get out, when you wake up act, and how you approach that person at that time, and how you make them feel about themselves when they wake up. That's about even when I leave the house, to let that person know that even though I'm gone, my mind will still be on you, and that's even when I'm out there, doing with a working or whatever, let me still, keep it in contact and let you know that I'm thinking about you. I appreciate you. And the little things that you do mean a lot to me. It's that all that is intimacy, because intimacy is just what it says, is the becoming close, right? So if intimacy is becoming close, then the idea is to get close in the mind before you get close physically. And I think the problem is that oftentimes guys want to get close physically before they want to get close mentally. And so if I can get close mentally with you, intellectually with you, and elevate how you feel about who you are, then that's going to change things when we get back to the bedroom as husband and wife, right? Right. And so then that kind of helps us get to that point where, again, like Hebrews points out, right, that the marriage bed is undefiled, okay? And if the marriage bed is undefiled, that would suggest then that what? My body belongs to you, your body belongs to me, and we are married. And so therefore, there is nothing that's off limits, right? Because whatever happens on the marriage bed is about the pleasuring of one another. And that pleasuring of one another, it starts not just when the doors are closed, and the lights are dim and Barry White is on the radio, right? Right. It's a little more than that. Right. So what's the first steps the male or female can take? They've recognized that the fire isn't all the way out.
but it's barely lit. How to get it back flowing pretty nice, steady flame. How do we get that back?
Well, I think the first thing is the recognition that sex and intimacy are not necessarily the same. Because when you initially, we are thriving on lust, right? And so lust doesn't need a whole lot of intimacy. But after a period of time, we have to recognize that. So once you recognize that, the thing now is to go back and say, well, hey, listen, how do we transform ourselves from being just a lustful couple to being a couple that is sharing true intimacy? Is really enjoying time spent together, because we are mammals, and mammals enjoy human contact, right? And so that's a part of intimacy. Do you hold hands when you go out in public anymore?
Right.
Do you sit close together when you're watching TV? Are you doing those kind of things that create that human connection anymore that people sometimes forget to do or just stop doing, period, those kind of things. You know what? And again, I'm not trying to tell the guys how to be players because, you got to get your own playbook, right? But simple things. If you ask the guy, when is the last time you gently brushed your wife's hair? But think about it, right?
Right.
Think about nature. We are mammals. We are closely aligned to the family, of primates, right?
Right.
Well, how do primates become close? They groom one another.
Yep.
Right? They sit together and they groom one another, right? And so there's something innate within us that finds that erotic.
Right.
But we get away from that. We kind of act like what do you call them animals that slide on the ground? Gosh, I'm drawing a mental blank. Yeah,
snakes.
I know, but what the general term for snakes and lizards and folk like reptiles.
Reptiles.
We kind of act like reptiles, which is hit it, quit it, move on, right?
Right.
But there's no intimacy with reptiles. Where there's intimacy with primates. But I'm just thinking about, when the last time you've noticed, your friends are probably going to tell you this, but, the reality is men don't groom their wives. There's no gently brushing of the hair, that kind of thing.
Right.
We know that women love massages, right? I mean, some men do too, but women, because what they really love? The human touch.
Right.
It's that gentle caressing and that human touch. And we don't do that, but that's intimacy. And so when the Bible is talking about the bed being undefiled, it's talking about all that kind of stuff and all that kind of intimacy that goes into making the mind find pleasure in more than just one thing, because it's simple. I don't care how much you love riding bicycles. After a while, if you ride it on the same place at the same time every day, it gets boring.
It's boring. Yep.
Right. So you got to find a new path. Right.
Right.
You got to find a new trail or something.
Right.
And it's the same thing, And so that's why, we often look at the Bible as being boring. If you want to find what intimacy is like in the Bible, then Song of Solomon is the book that's the guide to be utilized as how husband and wife should interact in an intimate relationship. That's it right there.
Right.
If you study that one, that's you can throw the player book in the trash can.
Right.
And pick that one up and boom, that's it right there.
So, all right. So you gave us the game plan on how to create intimacy. And you also talked about how to keep it there, right? Just, when it starts to get stale, recognize it, then switch it up a little bit, get a new path, try something different.
Mm-hmm.
So, and now trying something different, like you said, in the sex category, it's undefiled. So y'all can read between the lines on that one.
Mm-hmm.
So now
Now, let me say this right quick now. When I say try something different, I don't necessarily mean try something different sexually.
I know.
I mean, try some. I'm saying that there's some things that don't go out of style, which is human touch.
Right.
And that's what I'm talking about. Just human touch.
Right.
Just so you can reconnect with people.
Yeah, it did. Because I know, and when I read me and my wife read the book, the 5 Love Languages, and my love language was touch, and her love language was acts of service. So when she saw that, instantly she said, okay, now I have to, that she would purposely like just touch my arm or, get close to me because she saw that was my love language. If I was doing something, if I had a bad day, she knew what, touch was the thing that would like snap me out of it. So that's, I do highly suggest, couples get that book. It was very helpful. So what can we do, Dr. Daniels, to take our relationship to the next level? Let's say we're intimate and we really don't have issues in the bedroom per se. How do we take it to another level, like intellectually? Like if we are good intimacy, like our intimate level is pretty good, but how do we get to the next level to take us from 30 years old to like when you're 70,
right?
Now your intimate level's got to be pretty good.
No, I got you, but I'm just saying that sounds good in theory, but it actually is the reverse in practicality. Okay, and here's what I'm saying. What makes a person feel intimate when they first meet is not the same as what makes them feel intimate 20 years down the road. Right. So that it's like I say, it sounds good when people say, well, we do this and we do that. Well, okay, I hear you saying it, but just because you say it don't necessarily mean it's accurate. And I don't necessarily like to use secular examples, but I'm gonna throw this one in just for Maslow developed what he called a hierarchy of needs. Okay, and that basic need is food, water, shelter, so forth and so on. And at the top of the ladder is self-actualization. Okay, now you can use that same pyramid to look at intimacy. Okay, is that when you first start out, it is simple, right?
Yep.
Right, but the ultimate goal is to get a person to self-actualization. See, intimacy is not just how you touch me. Intimacy is not just how you hold me. Intimacy is how you make me feel. The other things are the methodologies that you use to help me feel a certain way. And so there are different things that you're going to do. It could be softly brushing my hair. It could be kissing somebody on the cheek. It could be, giving them a nice neck massage. But the ultimate goal of intimacy is for our minds to meet and mold together, right? Think about what the Bible says. And the two shall become one. The only way we can become one is if our minds are linked together, right? And so what that says then is that, again, intimacy means what? We become so close together that it's almost like we cannot be separated. So that means if I can help you get to where you are self-actualized, right? That's when we will have reached that peak of intimacy. And self-actualization is the highest rung on the ladder because all of us have an idea about what we would want to be if we were given the perfect opportunity at the perfect time, at the perfect place, and all that kind of stuff. Now, if I'm going to reach that level of intimacy with you, that means I have to get you there intellectually.
Right.
And if I don't do that, then I got some more levels to be climbed. So just because a person says to me, but we have a great relationship in the bed. If a person tells me that, my first thought is, okay, you got deficiencies then. Because your thinking is the bedroom is where the action should be occurring. Right. And that's not it, right? Think about it. Let's use a sports terminology, okay? For example, you don't know you've won the game and been the best team just because you have a higher score. However, a higher score allows you to say we are good.
Right.
But that ain't it all. That ain't it.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you still got to, it's the offense, it's the defense, it's the driving down, it's all that stuff that puts you in a position to go across the line.
Right.
Because you didn't get the ball on the 1 foot line. Right. You got the ball on the 20-yard line.
Right.
And you had to get down the field. So if you gauge it by what happens in the bed, what you're saying is that we made a touchdown and that's it. That's all. That's the only way you're gauging the team is we made a touchdown.
Right.
No, but that ain't how you gauge a team. The team is gauged on how they played. See, intimacy is about how you played as well as getting the touchdown. The bed is the last place. That is the going over the goal line, so to speak. But see, if we gauge it on the bed, then we're always saying is how was the sex,
right?
And that's not necessarily it. I can be stroking your arm, I can be giving you a massage, I can be doing all that stuff, but you are miserable on your job. Mm-hmm. And if you're miserable on your job, it's going to also show up in the bedroom, mm-hmm. Right?
Right.
But if I'm helping you to fulfill your desired purpose in life. Okay. If I'm helping you to fulfill your purpose in life, if we're connecting based on purpose, all that's going to translate and it's going to come to a crescendo in the bedroom.
Right.
Because you're feeling good all day long. You're not feeling good because you got home and you were just wiped out, tired, and I gave you a massage. If you came home wiped out, tired, and I give you a massage, you're closing your eyes and going to sleep.
Right.
And you'll be refreshed the next day and you're going to feel great. You're going to be pleased. You're going to be thankful. You know, husband did a wonderful thing. But if I help you get where you want to be on your job and you're excited about that and all those other things keep lining up. And when you come home, it's going to be fireworks. Even while you in there frying up my chicken,
right?
And while you cooking my mashed potatoes,
right?
And that's what I'm saying. When we think of intimacy, we tend to look at it from a narrow standpoint. And that's why I'm saying Song of Solomon. I got to tell you, and I'm not taking anything away from the other authors and all those other folk, but my point is simple: they didn't make man, God did.
Right.
Right. And if Song of Solomon gives you a clear reference point to say, this is intimacy,
right,
then why go other places? And see, Song of Solomon doesn't take the narrow point viewpoint. It takes the holistic viewpoint. Right. That intimacy is about how I help you perceive yourself in the world. Yeah. And that's why this woman said, I love this man so much. She said, because I saw myself one way and he allowed me to see myself a whole different way.
Right.
I thought I was ugly and he made me feel like I was the most beautiful woman in the world and vice versa. And that's what true intimacy does for you. Right. It allows people to see themselves the way God created them to be seen.
And to go back, when you made the football reference, and for the guys that understand, remember last year, the Pittsburgh Steelers, their first part of the year, I think they went like 8-0. Mm-hmm. They was winning games, but everybody kept, the real experts kept saying something is not right with this team. Mm-hmm. They're still 8-0. Mm-hmm. Something ain't right. Just like how you said, we got the touchdown. So if you get into the bedroom and doing the do, you say, well, I'm scoring. I'm scoring. I'm getting touchdowns. But then all of a sudden, what happened to the Pittsburgh Steelers? Mm-hmm. And what's so interesting in that is they didn't change anything. They thought it was a fluke. And look at them now. And now they're talking about it as the end of an era. But that end of an era started last year around week 10 and 11. Mm-hmm. And so what you got to really look at when you take that analogy, look at what's happening in your relationship. Mm-hmm. Everything could be going good, but is there little holes and little weak spots you need to shore up? And that's what you're talking about with intimacy. Like if you focus on the intimacy, which is if you create that foundation, you got something always to fall back on.
Well, I can take it a step further. If you focus on the process, you will always score.
Right. There you go.
Right. See, and that's the thing. If you focus on scoring, and that's what people do, they focus on scoring. No, don't focus on scoring. Right. Focus on the process.
Right.
And getting first downs. See, that's how I look at intimacy. So don't focus on what you're going to do when you get in the bed at night. Focus on what you're going to do during the day to make the person feel good about who they are.
Right.
That's what you focus on. If you focus on that all day long, then you will make a touchdown.
Right.
You know, if you focus on that all day long, you probably get a field goal during dinner time.
Right.
If you focus on that all day. So if you keep focusing on that, you know, I think that's what we had to look at. And that's why I go back to Song of Solomon, is because if you focus on that aspect of it, not focusing on what we're going to do when we get into bed,
right,
but focus on how am I going to make you feel, you know, all day long, the next day. How am I going to create in you an intellectual being that views themselves as being so worth and so valuable, you know, to me as an individual.
Right.
You know, there's a song that your generation has no clue about, because you're just, you know, so much younger than me, by the Dales, right? That says simply stay, S-T-A-Y.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I know the song you're talking about.
All right. And what he said to her is simple. He says, girl, you know what? I can't live without you. Right? I mean, and that song, as he's begging, he's making this woman feel like you are the most important thing in my life. He says to her, in a sense, that no matter what my day is like, when I see you, everything just disappears, and I feel like I'm the greatest man in the world.
Right.
And that's how we ought to be trying to treat both people in the relationship. The husband should be trying to make sure the wife feels that way, that, you know what, you're the best person in the world, and vice versa.
Right.
And if that happens, if both people are focused that way, everything falls into place. And that's why I'm saying people need to understand sex is not necessarily intimacy. Intimacy is not necessarily sex. But if you get the intimacy, if you focus on that, you'll have the best physical relationship you could ever dream of.
You know, the interesting thing, you mentioned the Dales, and it took me back to when my dad used to have the cassette tape when he recorded The Quiet Storm, when he would come back home here. And most of that was all the lead up. The song was the lead up to the, you know, but you listen to music now, it's all about the actual doing the do.
Mm-hmm.
When did society change from like just sex and not the whole intimacy thing, or the dating and the courting and oh, I love you, and the romance of things, and it just like we don't have that anymore.
You know, I don't know what caused the change. I really don't. I haven't done any serious studying, but I do know in my generation I have seen the change. You know, from those guys that were focused on romance, and guys that when you grow to, let me see how many women I can have, you know, as that's kind of thing. And so I don't have that. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer to that one. I just think that, you know, romance in a relationship should never stop.
Right.
You know, that idea that I'm going to make you feel like you are the most important person in my world should never stop. And if you keep doing that, if everyone is focused that way, that's when the two become one. That's what locks you in.
Right.
That's when you at work just can't wait to come home, because that person is who you want to be around. People don't want to come home because the person they're coming home to, they don't want to be around. Because that person ain't making them feel like they're the most important person in the world.
I had a guy tell me one time, he said, when you get off work, don't ever go straight home. Go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So your wife ain't ever like worrying you to be at home because you never started coming straight home. I was like, this is the dumbest advice. Like, I'm ready to go home.
Well, yeah. And there are many people that here's let me say this to our folk, just so you get it straight. If a person that you are married to doesn't want to come home, don't blame the person. Give them a reason to want to come home.
Right.
When you blame the person for not coming home, you give them a reason to keep staying out.
Yep.
Right? Because now we have an antagonistic relationship. and that's the key to me, right? So again, I get what you're saying because I know guys like that too. But I know why they say that because their thinking is, if I make her miss me,
right,
then it'll change things, and she'll go ahead and tighten up a little bit, and she'll start getting some good meals on the table. She'll start keeping the house clean. She'll get the kids in check, But it does. See, it has a reverse effect. It has a reverse effect. But I just caution you, women and the guys, same thing. Guys, if your girlfriend is not your wife, because if you ain't married, you ain't got no business dealing with the bedroom with her. Okay, let me say that up front. All right, but if it's your wife and your wife is hanging out with her girls at the club a lot, and you mad because she ain't home, the problem is not your wife. The problem is you haven't made the home the place that she wants to be.
Right.
So that's what your job is. Help her become self-actualized. She'll want to be with you. Because everyone wants to be with people that make them feel good about themselves.
Yep.
That's just the bottom line. Ladies, it's the same thing. If you can't keep your husband at home, if you want to watch the game, with the fellows all the time, it's because you haven't made the home the place that he wants to watch the games at.
Right.
That's it. All you got to do is make that man cave the kind of place that he just dying to get home to.
Right.
And believe you me, now he might invite a few friends over once in a while, but he'll be right there with you the whole time. And as a matter of fact, you can become his best friend as far as, games and things like that,
Yeah.
And that's what you do. And that's what when I'm talking about intimacy, that's what I'm talking about.
Right.
It ain't just about what we do in the bedroom. I can be intimate at the football game.
Right.
Because we're locking in together at the football game. It's all those kind of things on the roller coaster, whatever.
Right.
That's what I mean when I say intimacy. And if you do intimacy, you, like you say, you'll get your field goal in the car coming home, and then you get your touchdown when you get home.
Yeah. Well, anything you like to bring anything before we close out?
I think we kind of took it around the world this time.
Okay. All right. Thank y'all so much for listening and watching. Hey, please hit the like and subscribe button and hit that notification bell if you're on YouTube so you get notified when we drop these good episodes. Thank y'all so much. This is your host, CB Baker. Till next time.